It's crazy to think that Star Wars The Force Awakens hit theaters 10 years ago. And to this day, this is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. Probably my favorite outside of the original trilogy. And I know that's not necessarily the most popular thing to say online right now, but as you're watching this video, I encourage you to separate your opinion from this film from your opinion on the two films that followed it. I've seen multiple Disney Star Wars projects now be seemingly beloved by everybody, only later to be looked back on less fondly after future installments. And you know what, fair enough, if you end up being disappointed that they took these interesting plot points somewhere you didn't want them to, I can understand being frustrated. But it also doesn't change the fact that these were interesting plot points that you may or may not have devoted a large chunk of your time theorizing on in the first place. I don't think there's ever been more rampant speculation about Star Wars than in the era following this film's release. But yeah, for the sake of this video, I'm just going to be judging this film on its own merits, regardless of my thoughts on its sequels. So the year is 2014. It's been almost a decade without a Star Wars film, and then we got this. And as the very intelligent 9-year-old boy I was, I thought it was fake. I mean, at this point, I'd seen so many Episode 7 trailers that I guess I couldn't tell the difference between this and this. But luckily, it wasn't long before I saw this thing in a movie theater, and the second trailer released showing Harrison Ford back as Han Solo. And needless to say, this became my most anticipated movie of all time. And something tells me I wasn't alone on that. I mean, I don't think the phrase Star Wars is back could even be applied this well to when the prequel trilogy was starting up. For a lot of people, those films didn't really feel like Star Wars to them. So there was a feeling in the trailers for this movie that some fans hadn't felt since 1983. I vividly remember where I was when I first saw the merchandise start coming out for this movie. I was at a Halloween-themed store with my mom looking at costumes. And of course, naturally, I went right over to Star Wars stuff, only to see the new lightsaber from the Force Awakens trailer was hanging on the shelf and thinking to myself, man, this is really happening. I swear, I had been in denial over that entire year that this film was actually coming out, so I had several of those pinch myself kind of moments. I remember picking up the lightsaber and reading the name Kylo Ren for the first time. And starting then, Kylo Ren's face was plastered onto every single imaginable Star Wars product. I mean, the characters from this movie in general were everywhere. From the new droid BB-8 to the new iteration of the Stormtrooper. Captain Phasma's presence in the marketing would suggest that she was in way more of the movie than she actually was. And of course, we had a new trio of leads, Rey, Finn, and Poe Dameron, who felt like fan favorites before the film would even hit theaters. And when the film finally did come out, it broke nearly every record imaginable to the surprise of no one. When I first went to see the movie, I remember literally every poster at the theater being the Force Awakens poster, which, by the way, might just be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Honestly, I feel really sorry for every other movie that came out in this era because the Force Awakens sucked all of the attention out of everything else in theaters. There was a giant First Order flag up in the theater, and in general, there were Star Wars decorations everywhere. I think this is part of why Star Wars plays just so much better as a movie franchise. Because regardless of your thoughts on every film, it always feels like an event every time there's a new installment of the saga. When I first saw this film, I loved it so much that I considered sneaking into another screening of it as we were on our way out of the theater. This was the only Star Wars movie I watched in the year following this film's release. I think I watched it so many times I had it line for line memorized. Oh yeah, and then my friend and I ended up making an entire trilogy of films about Ben Solo's fall to the dark side, acting as a prequel trilogy to the new stuff. And that's another reason why this film is so special to me. I got to follow it leading up to its release and after its release, and it left an incredibly large impact on me. To this day, no film gets me more excited and captivated in the story than with The Force Awakens. So now let's talk about the actual movie, shall we? The Force Awakens had an incredibly difficult task to accomplish going into it, as it had a continuous story that really did feel complete. I mean, the original Star Wars trilogy really is a story with a perfect beginning, middle, and end. Sure, they made 3 more movies after that, but they were meant to give context to the original trilogy, and by the end of Episode 3, things really felt like they had gone full circle. Return of the Jedi pretty definitively ends with Anakin Skywalker saving his son Luke, fulfilling the prophecy and bringing balance to the Force, as Luke goes on to restart the Jedi Order. But even with an ending like that, I mean, Luke Skywalker does go on to restart the Jedi Order. Honestly, tell me you don't want to see where that story goes. Now, of course, they didn't really take advantage of those original trilogy actors in their prime. There was still so much potential even 30 years later to see these characters pass on the torch to a new generation. And hey, that also means there was balance in the Force for almost 30 years. Star Wars had the opportunity to start with a fresh, new story for a new generation, while also taking the advantage of the 30 plus years of lore that the franchise had built up. So how does The Force Awakens do this? I honestly think the template they chose for this movie is the most genius template they could have thought of. Just look at the opening crawl for this movie. Luke Skywalker has vanished. In his absence, the sinister First Order has risen up from the ashes of the Empire and will not rest until Skywalker the Last Jedi has been destroyed. Even if you hadn't seen a single Star Wars movie going into this, that first paragraph grabs you. I mean, if for some reason you hadn't at least heard of Luke Skywalker before this point, you understand that he is an incredibly important figure. And on the topic of the First Order, I really love the concept. People criticize the First Order for being an Empire 2.0, but that's literally the point of them. I mean, I actually do find it believable that just because the second Death Star was destroyed, that doesn't mean the Empire wouldn't possibly return again in 30 years in a new, updated iteration. Honestly, the Empire's never been cooler than they are here. They've never been scarier than they are here. Like, compare the scene of the Empire invading the Tantive 4 with them invading Jakku, and tell me with a straight face that the Empire is more threatening there. And as we're on the topic of comparing The Force Awakens with the original trilogy, let's address the elephant in the room, that The Force Awakens is a quote-unquote ripoff of A New Hope. Which, I mean, at this point it's been debunked several times, and the only way to really prove the point that it's a ripoff of A New Hope is to present an incredibly oversimplified version of the story. George Lucas himself has always talked about how Star Wars as a story is like poetry and it rhymes. There are repeating plot points in each trilogy. And to me, in film, the characters are what make the story. And honestly, tell me the character arcs that the characters go on in A New Hope are almost anything alike with the character arcs in The Force Awakens. When you look at Luke in A New Hope, he pretty much agrees to go with Obi-Wan right away, as his aunt and uncle are killed at the very start of the film. With Rey, she spends almost the entire movie trying to return to Jakku and continue wasting her life away there, while she waits for her parents as she is seeking that validation that she would presumably get from them, despite the fact that she deep down knows that they're never coming back. So she essentially lives in a delusion, but it's easier for her to keep lying to herself than to face the truth. She ends the movie finally ready to move forward and train as a Jedi. Finn is an incredibly fascinating character as he gives us an inside look that we've never seen before regarding the stormtroopers. We see one of these faceless bucketheads show humanity in the midst of battle, clearly in horror by what he sees. So he defects and ends up coming across Rey and BB-8. Like Rey, Finn spends the entire movie running from the fight, but for the reason that he is terrified of it. He grew up personally witnessing the power that the First Order has, and now he wants to get as far away from it as possible. This is until he's forced to infiltrate Starkiller Base when Rey, someone he cares about, is captured. Then this man who has been running from the First Order for the entire movie ends up facing down Kylo Ren with a lightsaber. This is an incredibly powerful character arc, and from this film alone, Finn became one of my favorite Star Wars characters. Rey and Finn are great characters, but the real MVP of this movie to me is Kylo Ren. Director J.J. Abrams himself has said that Kylo Ren essentially embodies this film, as he is an entirely new character with the DNA of what came before. In terms of who the villain of this film was going to be, it was pretty much impossible to create a character who could live up to that of Darth Vader, so the writers used that to create this character. This is a guy who essentially worships Vader, wanting to finish what he started, and at the same time he feels in the shadow of Vader, feeling the weight of his family legacy, as he is the son of Han and Leia. And by doing all of this, they end up creating a character who instantly became one of my favorites in the entire franchise, second only to Luke. I mean, everything about this character, other than the outfit, screams the antithesis of Vader. Vader is calm and collected, always one step ahead of the heroes, while Kylo Ren is emotionally unstable to the point where you can feel like he could snap at any second. I mean, even his lightsaber gives out that vibe. Han Solo is the original trilogy character with the largest role to play here. He serves as sort of the Obi-Wan Kenobi of this film, but it would be ridiculous to call them the same character here. After his son fell to the dark side, Han Solo went back to the one thing he was good at, that being smuggling. Much like the other characters in this film, he is actively running from the fight. I mean, he believes he lost his son forever and that things can't be fixed between him and Leia. His way of dealing with his grief is by blaming himself for what happened, but after finally, reuniting with Leia and talking it out, we see the hopeful Han Solo make his return. At the end of the film, he is willing to stand face to face with his own son, well aware of the danger that poses to him. And of course, this happens. I really hate when some people say that they completely threw out all of Han Solo's character development from the originals in this movie because he went back to smuggling, when that is so clearly not the case. From the interactions he has with the new characters and the way he talks about the Force, you can tell this is a much wiser and more experienced Han Solo, and his monologue about the Force gives me goosebumps to this day. It's still one of my favorite scenes in the entire saga. Now, these are the four main leads in this film that are given the most development. Obviously, BB-8 is a major new character in the film that moves the plot forward. Of course, I could go on and on about Captain Phasma's secret character arc in this movie that's just absolutely brilliant, but I feel like that would just make this video way too long. Of course, I want to give a shout out to Poe Dameron, who, despite not being in a large portion of the movie, is so incredibly badass and really adds the sense of fun that you should feel when you watch a Star Wars movie. Much like the other characters I've talked about, Poe instantly became one of my favorite Star Wars characters with this film. I mean, just in general, the energy that the cast brings to it is just absolutely incredible. And when I think about it, this film in general has everything that I want from a Star Wars film. It has a great sense of adventure, balancing that tone with some very high stakes that blends together into an incredibly captivating experience. It has phenomenal action sequences with some great Millennium Falcon chases, X-Wing and TIE Fighter dogfights, Rebels versus Stormtrooper action, and visually the lightsaber fights have never looked this good. The fights are intense and well choreographed despite not having the choreography that the prequels had, which wouldn't even make sense for this film, to be honest. Visually, it's just so incredibly satisfying to look at, at, and 10 years later it still holds up to virtually everything coming out today. I'd argue this is John Williams' best Star Wars score, with Rey's theme, Kylo's theme, March of the Resistance, and the Jedi Steps being some of the most iconic tracks in the series. And to top it off, it has some truly incredible character work that ties this whole movie together. And that is why Star Wars The Force Awakens is still great 10 years later. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.